We don't need any more motivation than we already have to take part in these majalis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Alhamdulillah, it's reached the point where if there's anything the Shia are known for, they're known for these majalis, correct? At the same time though, what I had in mind was, as some of our scholars have pointed out, to go over some of the verses of the Quran that we can look at to understand that, okay, this is something that the deen also wants from us, these majalis that we partake in, that we set up and organize, and people, they do their best to make these majalis as successful as possible. Obviously we have many hadiths that specifically say to remember Imam Hussein, to retell and recount his story and all of that, obviously. But in addition to that, it's nice to also be able to fit these majalis and what we do to kind of fit it under Quranic verses as well. Now, what does that mean? Do we have verses of the Quran that might tell us, hey, aqimu, just like we have aqimu salat, do we have verses in the Quran that say aqimul majalis lil Hussein? Obviously not. At least in this version of the Quran we have. Some people might have another version of the Quran, I don't know. But in this Quran that we have, we don't have such a verse in the Quran that says make sure to establish the majalis for Imam Hussein. Obviously that's not the case. But we have to understand, especially when it comes to some of the things that we do, the rituals that we practice as Shi'as, that it's not that everything has to specifically fall under a verse of the Quran for it to be justified. For example, you all know these examples that I'm about to give you. Where in the Quran does it say Salatul Fajr is 2 rak'ah? We don't have such a thing in the Quran. Where in the Quran do we find the details of the Hajj? We don't have verses of the Quran that speak about the details. The only details are وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. You have the means to go, you have to go. It's wajib on you. Once a year we have to go. Alright. So these are the basics, the general guidelines that we have. But then there will be a verse of the Quran that says, we want you to get all of your teachings and the deen from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, salawat. So the Quran will prescribe the Hajj, make it incumbent upon me. I need to know the details of this Hajj. Well, the details of this Hajj, where are they found? They're found in the Sunnah of the Prophet, obviously. And for us, an extension of the Sunnah of the Prophet is going to be the sayings of the Imams. Okay, this is all very clear. Same thing when it comes to other practices we will have. There will be things that sometimes we practice, they might not fall under a specific verse of the Quran. But that doesn't mean that, okay, this is something that is not necessarily encouraged by the deen. No, on the contrary, if it falls under a more general verse of the Quran, still it will be something that is considered encouraged in the Quran. All right? We don't want to turn out to be like some of those who are out there who want something specific for everything. I'll never forget back in the day, that year where there was a stampede in Hajj. Yeah, if things went bad that time, guess why? Because I was also on that trip. And so in Farsi we say, I'm the type of person that if I go next to the shore of somewhere, it'll dry up. Okay? So I bring bad omen as if. But anyway, that year, that was the stampede year, if you guys remember the Hajj. That year, we were trying to, that's the only time I've been to Hajj. We're going up to see the Mount of Hira. Alright, the cave of Hira. And so a person who knows Arabic though and can read Arabic, understands it, they can't help but see before going upwards towards the mount that on the walls there's all of this spray paint with messages. What are those messages? And these aren't just like some people coming at night and spray painting. No, this is something that, you know, it seems that those who are in charge, they've put it there. It's like nicely done. On the walls of buildings that are leading up to the place where you start going up the steps to go to the Mount of Hira, where the Prophet ﷺ received his first revelation. And so, what do those walls say? What are the messages on the walls? The messages on the walls said that the concept of and the practice of going and visiting the cave of Hira is not something the Sahaba practiced. And so, don't be too disappointed, brother. He's very disappointed. He's about to knock down this wall. Those walls said, this is not a practice of the Sahaba. And so, people, what are you doing? This is not encouraged. All right, well, obviously, the Sahaba of the time of the Prophet, they wouldn't go to visit that cave probably. Okay, no problem. Do you know why they don't visit the cave? Because the Prophet's there in front of them himself. Where are you going? Right? Where do you want to go? It's all here. It's kind of like those people that sometimes they kill themselves to go to, I'm not saying don't, but they'll make an extra effort sometimes to go, like in Karbala, they want to go to the maqam of Sahib al-Zaman. And if they don't get to go to that, they're upset and disappointed. While we all know another one of the maqams of Sahib al-Zaman is where? Next to the Zari of Imam Hussein. You know what I'm saying? So if you didn't get to go to that maqam, there's a much better maqam to go and not miss out on as well. Don't get too disappointed if you don't get to visit all the places where the Imams have visited. Because what's for sure is the Imam has gone to the Zari. Alright, so it's two birds with one stone. I get to visit Imam Hussein and the place where is maqam of Imam Sadiq as well. It's the maqam of Imam Sahib al-Zaman as well, and so on. Right? Anyway, point being, these people, they were living during the Prophet's time. Okay, no one goes to the Mount of Hira during the Prophet's time, assuming that that is the case. But if we don't have a specific guideline in this regard that says that it's something appropriate to go, yes, does that mean that this is not something to be practiced? This is something innovated and made up that we have no proof for it being encouraged or something good? The answer is, if you were to want to ask for everything in particular in the tradition, you might not find everything there. A lot of the things that we do fall under general categories. Yes, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Islam will determine how something is done. Alright, it will say Salat al-Fajr 2 rak'ah, for example. It'll determine it. Sometimes no, it gives you general guidelines. For example, the verse of the Quran says, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفْ. Don't tell your parents uff. Now someone says, oh Malana, I got angry at my parents, the other day, but I was careful not to overstep the boundaries of the Quran. Like, how so? This is not a true story, I'm just making it up. How so? He says, because I was careful. When I got angry, I didn't say uff to them. Because the Quran says, La taqul lahuma uff. Then what'd you do? Oh, nothing, I just slammed the door. I shouted at them, but I didn't say uff. Bro, you sounding Wahhabi. Because you're zooming in and getting fixated on what? The wording of the verse while missing that entire general guideline that's there. If it says don't say uff, what does that mean? That means the bare minimum, the least one can do that's not acceptable is to say uff or to exhibit their disgust to their parents. Otherwise, obviously, if uff is a problem, shouting is also a problem. Yeah? You can't do nada on them. You can't shout at them. Alright, so that's one example. Another example of the Quran, where it gives you a general guideline and then expects you to use this guy to figure out the rest. It says, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. I want you to be good to your parents. No one's going to sit down and be like, well, what does it mean to be good to them? It's kind of like those people who are like, hey, you want to lose weight? Yeah, I want to lose weight. You're like, well, you need to clean up your diet, do some cardio, maybe, stuff like that, I guess, whatever. And then they're like, okay, I'll do the exercise and I'm supposed to eat less. Teach me how to eat less. I'm like, well, stay away from this and that and, don't go to places where they're making fresh donuts, you know what I'm saying? And things like that. But if they put something in front of you, don't eat it. They're like, yeah, but teach me. When they put the donut in front of me, how do I not eat it? You're like, you don't open your mouth. That's how. Like, what am I supposed to tell you after that? It's very clear. How do I not sin? Oh, Sheikh, tell me how not to sin. Well, when the sin comes up, you don't do it. What do you want me to do? Tie your hands for you? Some things are very clear. بِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. A general guideline from the Quran. We want you to be good to your parents. Someone said there, but how am I supposed to be good? Well, being good is a universal universally understood and accepted concept. Doing good means you don't do bad to them. It means you help them when they need it. You help them when they even don't need it. Yeah? And so on, so forth. 100 examples you can think of ihsan. Alright? Nowadays, I bought my parents a laptop, let's say. Oh, no. There is no hadith that says buy them a laptop. So how do you know this falls in the category? It's ihsan is ihsan, my friend. It can have many different examples. As a matter of fact, thank God, the hadiths or the Quran have mentioned things in general terms. It makes things more dynamic. Why? Because think about it. If the Prophet had said, all of you people do ihsan by buying your parents, making sure to buy them at least once a year, buy them a donkey. Because back then they would use donkeys for transportation. I bet you today there will be some people out there who say we still have to buy our parents donkeys because that's the way to do ihsan. Baba, that was the way you do ihsan back then. Now you buy them a Ferrari. It looks like a donkey, the logo, but it's a horse, you know what I'm saying? Now, having said all of that, do we have to necessarily have specific guidelines for everything? Yes, we have to have guidelines for everything, but not specific to that certain specific matter. If it falls under a more general category, there's no problem. One example of that is the majalis of Imam Hussein. Those people who go to the cave of Hira, for example, why do they go? Are they going to the Mount of Hira, praying 2 rak'ah in the cave because this is something that Islam has prescribed, specifically? No. Then why are they going if Islam hasn't prescribed it specifically? Because generally speaking, we have these concepts in Islam, in the Quran, in our hadiths that look, put yourselves in environments that motivate you to be better. Stay away from environments that push you towards sin. Ta'awanu ala al-birri wa taqwa. Help each other out. When it comes to being good and righteousness and taqwa, facilitate for each other these things. Alright, so facilitation of good is something, as a general guideline. When I go up on the Mount of Hira, what does that promote within me? It promotes what? Taqwa within me. This is where my Prophet stood for the first time when revelation came unto him. Wow, look at all the sacrifices. Wow, look at how much he went out of the city, up this mountain, just so that he can preserve his tawheed to the point that Allah selected him. Why should I not obey Allah when I am living in such comfort? Yes, without having to worry about anything. The air condition is blowing. The food is there. Yes, shelter. Everything I have set. This is all, I would say, falls under this general category of go and see what motivates you more to do good in the way of Allah. When I go up there, of course, I don't have a specific hadith for this, but do I need one necessarily? No, there's a lot of cases like these. Anyway, coming to our topic, the majalis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, also we have verses that what we practice falls under the general guidelines of those verses. Now, am I going into this topic tonight and tomorrow night just so that we have something against the Sunnis now? That, oh Sunnis, see, my majlis of Imam Hussein, I'm doing it for this reason. Guys, do me a favor and let's forget about everybody else. Why is it that when we want to learn about Allah and theology and proving God's existence, what I have in the back of our mind is what? I'm doing this so I can disprove the atheists. Okay, that's a noble thing to be able to convince an atheist to embrace faith and all of that. I understand that, but sometimes we get so stuck in polemics and proving to the other side that I'm the best that we forget about our own growth and strengthening our own backbone in the faith. I don't care about the other side right now. Today I don't care about them. Tomorrow I don't care about them. Other times we'll talk about them if we need to. Right now I want to learn for myself. This as Shia especially, I feel like, and this whole Shia Twitter stuff that goes on in this day and age, you get this feeling that people, they're arguing just to prove that their side is better than the other side, even if they themselves have not benefited from their own side that they love so much. Example, the guy comes out and says, Meri Mola is better than Apka Mola. Why? Abka Mullah ran up the mountain in Uhud. You know what I'm talking about? Your Mullah ran away. My Mullah stayed in the battle. All right, good for you. How much have you taken inspiration from that? My Mullah is Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, who taught all of your Imams everything they know. Okay, good for you. How much of Imam as-Sadiq do you know? I was in this semi-important meeting once with other Mawlanas. And one of the sheikhs was like, yes, we need to introduce to the world that Nahj al-Balagha is such a good book and all that kind of stuff. I was like, yes, good, but question, Sheikh, how much have you studied it yourself and how much have you taught your congregation Nahj al-Balagha? All we're trying to do is say that I'm better or our side is better. All right, the Imams, mashallah, they made it to their destination. How much am I learning from them, taking inspiration from them? So, brothers and sisters, I'm not interested necessarily in using these verses to prove to the other side that look at how good we are. I don't care. I know how weak I am still. I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for my Islamic backbone. Once I'm able to practice things enough and I reach a certain point that I'm happy and I'm on a good trajectory, then okay, inshallah, we will go and take care of others as well if Allah wants. The Quran is very clear about this. قُوا يا أيها الذين آمنوا قُوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا. O you who believe, protect yourselves and your families from the fire. What about my community? What about this? What about all the Shia of the world? Relax, Imam Khomeini. Okay? You're not Imam Khomeini for now. For now, take care of yourself and your family. If you take care of that, then the time comes to move out more and help out more. Some people are still struggling with that, and then they go out and try to help others because they failed at home, maybe. God forbid. May Allah help all of us in that. That's a hard one. Yes. So, brothers and sisters, there is a list of priorities that we have to have in mind when it comes to these things. Some people on Twitter right now, Shia Twitter, the guy's like 14 years old. I'm like, Habib Elbe, I'm billak. Are we having any Lebanese here? I'm telling you, please, stop. Like, you are 14, you're not even baligh yet, and you're worried about guiding the Sunnis that are in London on Speaker's Corner? They're going to destroy you. And it's happened. I've seen some of them. They kind of flipped a little semi-Sunni after they got destroyed by arguing for the Shia side. Yeah, we don't need you to help us right now. You're 14. Figure out. You have a lot to figure out. And then when the time comes and you're knowledgeable enough, don't be one of those ones who Imam Ali said, they broke my back. The friends that are jahil broke my back. We don't want to be those types, inshallah. Anyway, long story short, what am I trying to say here? We're doing this for us right now. We're not going to go and say, oh, hey, Sunni, come here. I'm doing majalis of Imam Hussein for this. No, I'm telling myself this right now, that alhamdulillah, in addition to the hadiths that specifically tell me to uphold the memory of Imam Hussein, yes, I have verses of Quran, although they are general ones, yet still, what I practice, what I do is also, yes, an example of what the Quran is pushing me towards. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Alright, so what's the first verse that I want to cite, inshallah, and talk about tonight? Surah Hud, verse 120. It says, وَكُلًّا نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ. So it's talking about the previous prophets of Allah. So it's not the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But you know where we're headed with this, right? This verse gives us 4 reasons why previous prophets' stories are mentioned in the Quran for the Holy Prophet. Have you noticed that the Quran won't just be okay with and won't settle for one mention of Prophet Musa's story? How many times is Prophet Musa's story mentioned in the Quran? As kids growing up, did this question ever cross our minds? Why is Prophet Musa's story mentioned again here and again there and again there? Has this ever crossed our minds? Iblis's story here, there, okay, I know he didn't do sajda. What's the point of repeating it again and again? Well, there's a reason for that. Does Allah tell stories just for the sake of telling stories? That we check the box of Musa. Okay, Musa was mentioned, finished, I did my job, let's move on. 600 pages of Quran, but Musa's mentioned in it several times. Unlike the Old Testament will tell you about the creation of everything in Genesis. And then it moves on. The books of the prophets, books of kings it has. Tells you the story of Joshua. Tells you the story of Solomon, David, and all of these ones. But it moves on after that. I don't know if there's any mention of David after he's mentioned in the book of Kings. because they see him as a king, not a prophet. Anyway, is the Quran that type of book too? Is it trying to tell us a story only, or is there more to it? Obviously, there's more to it. The Quran is not a book of stories, no. Allah doesn't tell the story just to have told the story, no. Allah sees lessons in these stories, that's why He repeats them. He knows if I am going through the Quran, for example, reciting from cover to cover, Baqarah, and then Surah Prophet Musa is mentioned in Baqarah. And then after that, for the other 550 pages of the Quran, I never hear of Musa again and his story. Well, guess what? The very important lesson of Bani Israel and submission to Allah's will and command, which is what got them in trouble, the fact that they weren't willing to submit to His will, is not repeated again and again for me. If Iblis's story is not repeated, one time I hear about it, then 500 pages I don't see it anymore. What happens? The reason why he got kicked out of Jannah, or wherever it was, is not repeated to me. Well, he got kicked out because, once again, lack of submission to Allah's will. So Allah wants us to take lesson from these stories. He doesn't just tell us stories just for the sake of telling us stories. Another good reason why He doesn't tell us stories just for the sake of storytelling is the fact that not only does He repeat stories, but He takes details out of stories that would have been so cool if we knew them. Why? He takes details out. Why? You don't need to know everything. You need to know the amount that's going to help you secure your akhirah. So for example, in the Quran it says, Ya dhal qarnayn, inna ya'juj wa ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. That we said to Dhul Qarnayn. Who's Dhul Qarnayn? Dhul Qarnayn literally means the possessor of two horns. We're talking like Marvel type stuff here. You know what I'm saying? Like two horns? So it must be a villain, right? Turns out this two-horned, whoever it was, Allah speaks to this person. Or someone, angels are speaking to him. So he's not a bad guy. I am very curious to know, who was this Dhul Qarnayn? I want to identify. Guess what? The verses of the Quran never identify who he was. Wouldn't it be cool if we knew who Dhul Qarnayn was? Some even have gone to the point where they say it might have been Alex the Great. Well, wait a question. Are these horns actually growing out from his skull? Or is it a helmet with horns like the Vikings? You know, the Vikings of Scandinavia, those ones. Which one is it? No details whatsoever. All we know is that he was sent to counter the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Who are they? Were they the Mongols of that time? What was it? No details. Allah, it's as if Allah is saying in the Quran, don't worry who it was. That's a detail I chose not to tell you. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What you should be doing about it is see what is the message of this story and take that. Why are you all fixated on the details that don't matter to you? You see? Storytelling, Allah would have had, the Quran would have been much cooler, according to some people's standards, if these details were in there too. But they're not in there. What does that show us? It shows us that Allah is not after storytelling for the sake of storytelling. So number one, He repeats stories again and again. And number two, He takes details out of stories that would have been interesting to know. Yes, interesting is one thing. Securing your akhirah is another thing. He doesn't mention those details because they're not necessary. So this shows that Allah tells stories for a reason. Now, 4 of those reasons are in this verse now that I'm about to recite. Surah Hud verse 120. كُلًّا نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ. We tell you the stories of all these prophets. Man, that which نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. Number 1. Number 2. جَاءَكَ فِي هَذِهِ الْحَقَّ. Number 3. موعظة or موعظة. Number 4, ذكرى للمؤمنين. 4 reasons why we tell you the stories of these prophets and we repeat them to you. By the way, we are always repeating and recounting, retelling the story of Al-Hussein every year as well. Am I not right? Sometimes someone might ask, well, why? We know what happened and all of that. Well, are we telling the story of Hussein just for the sake of telling the story of Hussein? Nope. What do we have here now? that we find applicable to what we practice as well. Number one is, O Prophet of Allah, we tell you these stories because as a result of that, نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ, we strengthen and make steadfast your heart with these stories that we tell you. O Prophet of Allah, you're struggling with the mushrikeen. They kicked you out of Mecca after Abu Talib died and Khadija died, and you don't have support, and you went to Ta'if. And then in Ta'if, they pelted you with stones and kicked you out of Ta'if, and now you're sitting out in the desert somewhere in some garden that had some grape vines and stuff, and you're pleading to Allah, oh Allah, where do I go? What do I do? We send you the story of Nuh and Surah Nuh and what his people did to him. Through hearing the story of Nuh, O Prophet of Allah, we strengthen your heart. If 23 years you're struggling with your people, well, guess who struggled for 950 years? 950 years. Think about it. You propagate Islam for 950 years and you only get a handful of believers. Think about it. Like, would you guys renew or extend my contract as Maulana here if I was here for 950 years and only 3 people show up? Obviously not. Nuh alayhi salam, apparently something like that happened to him. After all these centuries, 950 years, it says he called his people. The Quran says, in the end, only a handful. Is that not demotivating? O Prophet of Allah, 23 years you're struggling as well. When you hear the story of Nuh, it strengthens the heart. Yes? When you hear the story of Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam, Prophet Ayyub was living the life, guys. Prophet Ayyub, he was bawling. Alright? He had everything. And then the story goes like this. This is in the hadith, it's not in the Quran. The shaitan goes to Allah, he says, Oh Allah, this servant of yours that is always showing gratefulness to you and shukr to you and all that, you know why he's doing that? Because you gave him everything. I mean, I don't know about you guys, if God gave me everything, I would thank Allah every day for sure. I would pray all the time, you know. Shaitan says, this insan that you were so proud of, oh Allah, it's because he has everything. Otherwise he wouldn't be worshipping you and thanking you this much. Allah says, take whatever you want from him. Take whatever you want and see what happens. I'll prove to you that you're wrong. And so you all know the story probably. It took like 7 years or so. Ayyub lost everything. His sons, his orchards, his wealth, his health, they say, and so on and so forth, all the way to the last thing. That he even lost his wife, the only support he had left. I know some of you probably would want that right now. But this is Prophet Ayyub we're talking about here. And to flip the script as well, I'm sure that more sisters would want that. But look, this is the test for all of us, brothers and sisters. Allah has to test us in one way or another, right? Jokes aside, Ayyub loses everything, they say. Okay, O Prophet of Allah, you lost Khadija, you lost Abu Talib, you were stuck in the valley for 3 years, Shi'ab Abi Talib, and the sanctions they put on you. And they say that that's where Bibi Khadija's wealth was spent, most of it. Think about it, you have to buy a loaf of bread for $100. I mean, you're going to run out of funds eventually, right? Alright, so when you are struggling with all of this, O Prophet of Allah, when we send you the story of Ayyub, it is something that يُثَبِّتُ بِهِ or نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. We strengthen your heart with it. Same with Prophet Yaqub. Yaqub for all those decades, weeping for Yusuf, but he never loses hope. O Rasulullah, they kicked you out of Mecca. No problem. We promise you that you will come back. إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَرَادُّكَ إِلَى مَعَادٍ. The Quran says that you will be returning. Ma'ad here doesn't mean resurrection day. Ma'ad means it comes from aud, to return. We will return you to Mecca one day. When they were throwing Prophet Yusuf in the well, in the beginning of Surah Yusuf even, it says this as well. That when they threw him in the well, over there Allah made a promise. And I'm pretty sure Yaqub was aware of this promise as well. And Allah fulfilled his promise. I'll tell you the promise in a minute. But Yaqub never lost hope. O Rasulullah, we promised you something, you lose hope either. Your heart is strengthened because we tell you the story of Yaqub. What was the promise Allah made? When they were throwing him in the well. Now this is interesting because Yusuf is a child. But it seems that Allah somehow revealed to Yusuf that what? لَتُنَبِّئَنَّهُمْ بِأَمْرِهِمْ هَذَا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. that you will one day tell them about this. Remember later, decades later, when his brothers came back to him, when he's like the big boss in Egypt, what happened? Yusuf eventually tells them, they said, أَإِنَّكَ لَأَنْتَ Yusuf? Are you definitely, is that you, Yusuf? He says, yes, this is Yusuf, وَهَذَا أَخِي. This is my brother. He told them, but then obviously he also told them, لَا تَثْرِيبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْيَوْمِ. I will not punish you anymore. There's nothing I have against you now. All right? Shaitan got between us and all of that. We're good. O Prophet of Allah, we tell you the story of Yaqub and Yusuf. Then for you also, the promises that we promised you, you will have hope and not lose hope in them. Okay. So, نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ مَا نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. There is in these stories that which strengthens your heart. Brothers and sisters, if the stories are there that strengthen the heart, now you tell me, are there not stories after these prophets that also strengthen the heart? Obviously, the story of Hussein strengthens the heart maybe more than anything else. Yeah? True, it didn't happen before our Holy Prophet and the Quran has not spoken about it. Yes? But all in all, what do we find in the story of Hussein? And no one has issues with Imam Hussein ﷺ except for those ones who have marad and sickness in their hearts. Otherwise, you don't have to be Shia to read the story of Al-Hussein and not be strengthened by his story. Your heart strengthened by... So, for example, a tragedy befalls me. Oh my God, is God upset with me? Does God not like me? Why is this? Why is that? No, stay strong. Why? Because Hussein ﷺ, what's for sure is Allah loved him. Did Allah not love Hussein? If there's anyone out there that Allah loves, it's going to be Imam Hussein ﷺ. Yet the worst of tragedies befell him. So, Habibi, don't worry. Don't get upset. Why? Thinking that Allah doesn't love me, that's why this tragedy has befallen me. No, tragedy befalls everybody. The courage of Hussein, the patience of Hussein, the forgiveness of Hussein, all of this falls under that category of مَا نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. Your heart is also strengthened upon not just hearing about previous prophets, but also about the story of Hussein ﷺ. All right. That's number one. Number two reason why, O Prophet of Allah, we tell you the stories of all the previous prophets is what? وَجَاءَ فِي هَذِهِ الْحَقِّ. In these stories, haqq and truth comes your way. When you read these stories, you come to the conclusion that, oh, this is what haqq looks like, this is what batil looks like. Oh, Fir'aun was as if he was a god. But it doesn't matter if as the Quran says, if the bodies of water or streams of water run from under you, because that's what Fir'aun said. That was his argument. I'm your Lord. Do you not see from under my throne come the streams of Egypt and so on? Like, bro, you just put your throne on there. That's what you're talking about. But that was his argument. That I am your Lord. Look at these streams that come from under my throne and things like that. All right, so someone can be wealthy. Someone might even dress nice. But they're an enemy. Just because someone looks good doesn't mean... You get this out of the story of, let's say, Musa. The guy has everything. Fir'aun has everything. Does that mean that necessarily haqq is going to be there? No. Again and again and again, the stories remind us that these are not the measuring stick. And so then you're like, oh wow, in the story of Imam Hussein, it's the same thing. Imam Hussein's story is all haqq on one side, all batil on the other side. If anyone was to ask me, is there any other example better than the example of Karbala where you can easily identify all of haqq on one side, all of batil? I would say no. In the battle of Jamal, Imam Ali's army had taken prisoners. In the end, it's been narrated that the Imam said, let them all go. Why? They fought against the Imam of their time. He said, I understand, but they were confused. The lines are a little blurred. You got Sahaba on this side, you have Sahaba on that side. Because people are a little confused, let them go. In other words, haqq and batil, there's a little bit of a blur for some people. But brothers and sisters, Karbala is not the case. There ain't nobody, all right, that's going to be off the hook, at least in my very humble opinion, that fought against Imam Hussein. I just can't see it. I can't. Because haqq is 100% apparent. You don't have to be Shia anymore. You have to just understand this is one of the 5 Ashabul Kisa, the last of the 5. There's no one else walking on the face of the earth. Yeah, at such caliber. Everyone understands. You think the people that were in the army of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they understood and have ma'rifah towards the Imam, complete ma'rifah? No. There were people who were Uthmanis on Imam Hussein's side. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, they say, was an Uthmani, which means that he had no problems with Uthman. No, we had problems with Uthman. As a Shia, you have problems with Uthman, I'm sorry. He opened the door to all the problems that we have. That Banu Umayyah came eventually, Muawiyah got the power he had and all of that. Uthman, because he was Banu Umayyah too, he opened the doors to that. We have issues with Uthman. Zuhair, they say he was an Uthmani, based on what is famously mentioned about him. But when the time comes, and maybe he didn't know the truth, I mean, it's not his fault. And that's when the truth actually shows itself, he can tell the difference. He's like, I'm going to be on this side. Of course, his wife also pushed him in that direction. The power of having a good partner. All right. Haqq and batil. When I look at Yazid though, what do I see? Now we have this thing where we portray bad guys as ugly. Usually, that's what the secular world has taught us. No. Sometimes the bad guys are pretty good looking. Yazid, they say, was pretty good looking. All right? They have explained and depicted the way he looked. It was pretty good, actually, they say. Fair-skinned, I don't know this, that, but he is the most evil of them all. When a person recounts or hears the story of Al-Hussein alayhi salam and hears these things about Yazid and all that, they won't fall for the suit and tie in the likes of Netanyahu today. Yes? To think that, oh no, that doesn't look like a bad guy. It has nothing to do with looks. Haqq and batil become clear. May Allah's la'na be on all of the zalimeen and the zalimeen of today. The haqq and batil becomes clear. جَاءَكَ فِي هَذِهِ الْحَقَّ. These stories give you a measuring stick. Al-Hussein alayhi salam's story gives us a measuring stick. Moving on. وَمَوْعِظَةٌ. There is maw'idha in these stories of previous prophets. Maw'idha. We have this word in Farsi, and I'm pretty sure we have it in Urdu too. Maw'iza. Have you heard this word before? Do we have this in Urdu? Maw'iza? Yeah? Maw'iza? You don't have it? Not mu'jiza, but maw'iza. Maw'iza. Alright, it means to admonish, it means to preach something, it means to these kinds of things. It says in these stories you find maw'idha. When someone preaches, they're trying to do maw'idha, it's called. But we have a question here. What's the difference between maw'idha and hikmah? The verse didn't say, in these stories you find hikmah, wisdom. You find in these stories maw'idha. Brothers and sisters, I want to say something here. That maw'idha is wisdom and then some. Wisdom is a little bit less than maw'idha, according to what Mutahhari says. I want to read to you what Shaykh Mutahhari, rahmatullah alayhi, says in this regard. Okay? Hikmah is wisdom, knowledge, information, let's say. Hikmah is another word that they use for philosophy. Okay? Question. Do I have to have a super religious person teach me knowledge for me to be able to learn it? Do I have to have a super practicing Muslim to teach me math, for example, for me to learn math? Yeah? No, that's not the case. You can get hikmah from anywhere. I think the famous hadith also says the same thing, that خُذِ الْحِكْمَةِ وَلَوْ مِنْ كَافِرٍ, if I'm not mistaken, or وَلَوْ مِنْ munafiq, something like that. That gain hikmah and knowledge from wherever you can, even if it's from a munafiq. If they're actually teaching you something that's worth it, go for it. Okay? Now, that's hikmah, knowledge and information. But then you have something called maw'idha. Sometimes I have knowledge. That means the path has become clear to me. Sometimes something nudges me in the direction of this path to actually traverse it. That is maw'idha now. And this is where Shaykh Mutahhari makes that distinction very nicely. He says, maw'idha, unlike hikmah, maw'idha is something that you have to have someone special tell you, otherwise you're not going to actually move and be moved by what that person is telling you. So, if I want to learn math, I can learn it from even the worst of the worst. But can the worst of the worst nudge me towards moving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No. Not necessarily. Actually, no, it's not even possible. On the flip side, someone who is righteous, if they tell me one word sometimes, it has an impact on me. If the whole world had told me the same thing, it wouldn't have an impact. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah? You'll have stories of great ulama, great arifs, whatever it was. Someone says, I was struggling with a sin, and I saw this I saw this great scholar that everyone knew is one of the best when it comes to practical irfan and movement towards Allah and so on. And I told him, I'm struggling with this sin. What do I do? He looked at me and he said, don't sin anymore. And that was it. Because think about it. If you go to Imam Hussein and you tell him something and he says, from now on, I don't want you to do this. Take that versus a person like me telling you, from now on, I don't want you to do this. It makes a big difference. Why? The one who's speaking has an effect on the heart. So it's about the heart now. It's not about intellect, math. No. It's about this. And look what Mutahari says here. May Allah bless his soul. 50 years ago, the guy was ahead of his times. He says in this book, the difference, I'll go through it quickly because you got the concept. Just look at the wording that he uses now. He says, the difference between hikmah and maw'idha lies in this, that hikmah is for instruction and imparting knowledge, while maw'idha is meant for reminding. Hikmah is struggle against ignorance. When you want to gain knowledge, it's because you don't want to be ignorant anymore, right? And maw'idha is struggle against negligence and indifference. Beautiful. Hikmah deals with the intellect, and maw'idha deals with the heart. Hikmah educates, maw'idha prepares the intellect for employment of its reserves. Hikmah is a lamp, maw'idha is eye-opener. Think about it. You put a lamp on the road, okay, now I can see the road. But if my eyes are closed, okay, the road is lit up, but my eyes are closed. Something has to open my eyes so I actually can move. Maw'idha does that. It pushes you forward, he says. Hikmah is the language of the intellect, maw'idha is the message for the spirit. And so he says, accordingly, the personality of the speaker plays an essential role in maw'idha, which is not the case with hikmah. The speaker can be the worst of the worst. He's teaching you math, you learn math. All right, having said all of that, and it goes on, I don't want to go through the whole thing. Brothers and sisters, the third item on the list was maw'idha. O Prophet of Allah, when we tell you the stories of the previous prophets, it's something that motivates you. It's not just, oh, now I know this story. No, it gets you going, gets you off your back. Yeah? Motivation. Question, brothers and sisters. I mean, you know what I'm about to say, right? The story of Al-Hussein, is it not maw'idha for us? Just like when that person goes up to the cave of Hira and it's motivation for them, it's a maw'idha for them to be a better person. The story of Hussein doesn't actually push us in a certain direction. Obviously it does. It goes without saying. Every year, when is the time that the masajid are filled up the most? Is it Ramadan? Maybe, yeah, on the nights of Qadr, because, it's like buy one, get 10 free. Allah gives offers over there, and Allah knows what He's doing. For Muharram, though, even if they were to tell us, you're not going to get anything, do you think people come for the sawab of Muharram? Obviously, that's something that we have in our mind, in the back of our minds. But let me tell you something, love is not about sawab even. Okay? The love of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam moves mountains. You will find the worst of the worst, they will show respect to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and will love him. And even if they're never in the masjid throughout the year, worst sins ever, the guy comes. Imam Hussein, I always say this, when Muharram comes, Imam Hussein casts a net that indiscriminately pulls everything in. Right? You know these nets that they go fishing with? They're like, oh, this one kills dolphins, this one kills turtles and all that. Imam Hussein throws it in and just brings in everybody. And you really have to be in bad shape for that net not to pull you in. And when this net draws people in, some get stuck in this net of love and stay in this net of love and change their lives for the better. Are you kidding me? Maw'idha. The most maw'idha I can think of is in the story of Al-Hussein alayhi salam. And so the story of Hussein falls under the same category as the stories of previous prophets. All you get from the story of Imam Hussein is what? مَا نُثَبِّتُهُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. Am I saying this for the Sunnis? I'm saying this for us, guys. I don't care about anybody else right now. You get ما نثبت به فؤادك. You get جاءك في هذه الحق. You get موعظة, and finally ذكرى للمؤمنين. I don't need to open this one too much. Dhikra means reminder. If you're a believer, yes, Muharram does wonders for you, just reminding you again and again and again. Who is it out there that doesn't need to constantly be motivated, constantly be reminded? Just the same way Prophet Musa's story has to be mentioned again and again in the Quran, the story of Al-Hussein has to be mentioned every year to us as well. Yes, so that we can also, inshallah, one day be moved and get off our backs, inshallah. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. In these nights and days, as this caravan makes its way to Sham, there's one child that should have been in this caravan but never made it. And I always say that this was one of those big tests that Imam Hussein went through. I want to go back to the day of Ashura. And that 10, 11-year-old orphan, that Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he has a soft spot for the orphans, brothers and sisters. We all know the story of Qasim and how hard it was on Abu Abdullah to let him go to the battlefield and then to bring him back from the battlefield in that state. It says that he was digging his heels into the sand out of pain. Every one of these shuhada that would fall, it's as if Imam Hussein had to get something off of his chest. He would make sure to personally go, they say, next to the body of that person who was dying, sit next to them and recite the verses of there are some who have promised to Allah and have fulfilled their promise. مِمَّنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. Think about it. You're dying on the hot plains of Karbala. Imam Hussein next to you reciting these verses to you. He knows that this will be somewhat of a relief for them. And they would say, Awafit, did I not fulfill my promise? Oh, Abu Abdullah, are you happy with me? Of course I'm happy with you. So Imam Hussein does his best for every one of these shuhada. If he doesn't do this, he feels bad, it seems, to not be able to do something. So for Qasim, it said, Qasim, it's killing me that you call me, but I can't do anything for you. As he's dragging his heels and digging his heels into the ground out of pain, his life departs. But brothers and sisters, there's a brother of Qasim. It seems that if all those tests weren't enough for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, if Asghar wasn't enough, if Abbas wasn't enough, if Ali al-Akbar, Qasim were not enough, a time comes in the Qatligah itself that Allah, it's as if says, Oh Hussein, we want to test you one more time because you're the one who's dying slowly and painfully. Imam Sajjad said, I am the son of the man who qutila sabra. He died, but he suffered dying. And so they left him under the hot sun for maybe hours even, until one person would come and strike him, another would come eventually, until they finished him off. But it wasn't a quick thing that happened. In this time, Imam Hussein is being tested again and again. But in those final moments, they say that he looked towards the tents and saw Zainab and Abdullah ibn al-Hasan, the brother of al-Qasim, the other son of Imam al-Hasan, this orphan that he has a soft spot for. He looks and sees Abdullah. Abdullah pulls his hand from Zainab and runs towards the Qatligah. As one of the enemy is getting closer to Imam Hussein to strike him, Abdullah says, Wallah la ufariqu ammi. I will not leave my uncle. This enemy begins to strike. He brings his hand in front of the enemy. Instead of striking Imam Hussein, the hand of Abdullah is severed and he falls in the chest of Hussein, fluttering like a little bird in his blood. Hussein, do something for this child. I can't. How much of a test does Hussein have to go through? For all the shuhada, Hussein does something. Here he can't do anything. He can't even help himself. Oh, son of my brother, patience. It's only then that Allah sends an arrow in the lap of Abu Abdullah, finishing off Abdullah in the arms of Abu Abdullah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين
ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا پتران دیا لاشا ہے دے ٹکڑے ریاں لب دیا وچ سہراوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا اے ماوا کربلا آنکھ ماں قاسم دی ماتے احسان کری آنکھ ماں قاسم دی ماتے احسان کری دیر تئی لڑے دروی تیرے ٹکڑے مطابق بندھنیاں نے میرے ویر حسین دساوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا صبر دے مالک نو سین لیلا کے اذن جے دے تے میں صبر دی سانج چی اکبر دے سینے چو سانگ ہٹاوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا جب قیدی ہو کے رنگیا مکے تل چوں وین زینب کیتا اولا شاول ماوا نہ ویکھیں کتے رک نہ جاون ساوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا شمر دے خنجر دے وار زہرا رو کے نالے سین کوے او میں چکیاں پیس کے پالے سی کہ وہ ہاتھ گردن تو چاوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا 14 صدیاں ہویا فاطمہ دی نواں الاجل پڑے دیاں سکلین اجیوی تک دیاں نے او مہدی پتر دیراوا ماں کربلا دیا ماوا ماوا پتران دیا لاشا دے ٹکڑے رہیا لب دیا وچ صحراواں ماں کربلا دیا ماں بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا